Well, good afternoon. We're going to start our AI Stream 2. We've got three exciting speakers this afternoon, Maura Grossman, Lai-Ping Fu, and George Shaker. So we're going to start with Maura, and I'm just going to give a brief intro here on Maura. Maura is alongside working as a research professor in the School of Computer Science at the University of Waterloo. She is an adjunct professor at the Osgoode Hall Law School, as well as an eDiscovery attorney and consultant in Buffalo, New York. She is also principal of Maura Grossman Law, and she pioneered the use of technology-assisted review, short form TAR, for electronic discovery. Maura has been a court-appointed special master, mediator, and expert in the court and many high-level federal and state court cases. Are we ready to go live there now? I'll turn it over to Maura. You need to share your presentation, I'm guessing?
Sarah's going to do that for me.
Yes.
Okay. So there we go. Well, and I turn you over to Maura. The stage is yours.
Thank you very much, Harold. Hello, everybody. It's great to be here, and good afternoon. I'm going to talk to you about some work that I've done with my colleague at the University of Waterloo, Gordon Cormack. And we've embarked on a series that has taken us on an interesting path from law to medicine. Next slide, please. So let me tell you a little about me. I started out as a clinical psychologist and hospital administrator in New York City. I worked after about 10 years in that field. I decided to go to law school and ended up as a litigator at a large white shoe firm in Manhattan, New York. I became what's called an eDiscovery lawyer, meaning that I would have huge amounts of data, and I would have to find the relevant evidence in the case in this huge vat of data. That led me to machine learning and AI, and for a variety of reasons, including my collaboration with Professor Cormack, who also is my fiance, I ended up at Waterloo and teaching courses both in law and computer science, mostly in the area of AI, law, ethics, and policy. I spent a stint as director of women in computer science, and then about 2 years ago, I received the West Graham Faculty Research Fellowship, which took me back to work in AI and health. So it's been sort of a circle. So that's me. So next slide, please. My research focuses on what's called high recall information retrieval, or high stakes information retrieval. And the goal is to find substantially all of the information in a huge corpus of data with the least possible effort. So one application is this technology-assisted review and electronic discovery, which is litigation, where you have millions and millions of documents. You need to find the ones to produce to the other side, or the other side has produced millions of documents to you, and you need to find the ones to use in the case. A second use, which I'll talk about, is records curation. So I've done a lot of work with archives and government libraries, official libraries, where they need to find all of the public records to make public under FOIA and Sunshine sort of requests. A third use, which I'll talk about today, is how do you find all of the studies on a particular topic when there are millions and millions and millions of studies out there and you want to find just the ones that are relevant to your topic, and that's called systematic review. Another is I need to label a data set. I need to note everything in that data set that's about a particular topic Say I'm a journalist, how might I do that? And many more applications as easy as I want to find everything about me on the web. Next slide. So the legal problem looks something like this. I've collected 26.5 million documents from the witnesses. I remove the birthday cards and the menus and stuff like that. I take out the duplicates and I'm left with 17.25 million. I load those in a database and now I have to find the evidence in a case. What I don't know is that 64,406 of those documents are relevant to the litigation, or 3 in every 1,000. And my task is to find those 64,406, or as many of them as I possibly can, while reviewing the least possible number. Why do I not want to review 17.25 million? Because if I hire a contract attorney, a contract professional, it's going to cost me about $1 a document to look at. And if I hire a law firm attorney, it's going to be somewhere between $4 and $5 a document. And I don't want to spend upwards of $17 million on this task. I want to spend as little as I can. So I have to find all the documents, review the least possible number, and I have to be in a position to show the court and my adversary that what I've done is reasonable and that I have indeed found the evidence. Next slide. So what people were doing was, if they had a request that was, please produce any and all documents concerning the effect of MH on tumoricity in hamsters, they would throw a bunch of keywords at it and try to find the documents this way. And lawyers thought they were so smart and really good at doing this. But it turns out they would only find about 22% of the documents, and they would bring in about 70% junk. So 70% of the documents, ka-ching, ka-ching, they were looking at and spending all this money on, and they had nothing to do with tumoricity, and they would miss lots of documents. So this was not a good way to do it, and you could also not do it by having human reviewers review 17 million documents. So I came along and said, there's got to be a better way to do this. We have to be able to use some technology to do this. Next slide. So a couple of us approached the National Institute of Standards and Technology in the United States, where I was living at the time. And they're the people in Washington, D.C. who measure things. So if you go to NIST's office in headquarters in Gaithersburg, Maryland, you can see the official pound and the official ruler for 1 foot and the official Kevlar vest that is the most bulletproof. And we asked them, help us find the best way to search for evidence. And we did experiments in 2006 to 2011, and again in 2015 and 2016. And what we did was bring together researchers, lawyers like myself, people out, vendors in the industry from all over the world came together to do research experiments to see if we could use machine learning to improve on this silly keyword searching and manual review that people were doing. Next slide. So what technology assisted review is, it's a process for prioritizing, meaning ranking, or categorizing a huge set of documents using computer technologies, in other words, using supervised machine learning or using AI, that harnesses human judgments of one or more subject matter experts. So we would have a lawyer look at a small subset of the documents to train the computer, and then the computer would be able to extrapolate what it learned and apply it to the other millions and millions of documents. Next slide. So in 2011, Gordon and I decided, well, we think this is actually better than lawyers. We'd been experimenting with it for a couple of years. And so we decided to do a study to pit the lawyers against the supervised machine learning, or the TAR. And because we figured nobody's going to use this unless we can show them that the TAR is actually better than humans. Next slide. So I won't go into all of this, but if you look at the bottom slide, H5 and Waterloo were two different TAR methods, and Trek were humans, and the humans were either third-year law students or professional attorneys who looked at the documents, and we gave them the same 5 tasks and said, find everything in a set of 836,000 documents, and we looked at who did better. Recall is the percent of documents that they found. So you can see on average, the technology found 76.7% of the documents, and the humans only found 59%. If you look at the precision, that precision has to do with accuracy. How many documents were actually on point versus how much junk. And you can see that the technology did a heck of a lot better than the humans on accuracy and on precision, and F1 is just an average of the two. It's a weighted average. And again, the technology did much better than the humans. So this was the first study ever that showed that supervised machine learning could beat humans. Next slide. For those of you who are a little more visual, we were trying to get to the gold star in the upper right-hand corner. The blue diamonds were the technology, the red diamonds were the humans, the green diamond was that keyword approach. And you can see that more blue diamonds are closer to the gold star than red. And there's one red up there, and you may say, well, Maura, why is there one red up there? Well, when we asked humans to look for documents about football, they were pretty good at finding them. When we asked them to look for documents about circular prepaid transactions or FASB 140 or something like that, really technical legal concepts, you can see their performance falls off. Next slide. So here we had shown that this works in the legal sphere. So, you know, when you have a really good hammer, you embark on finding other things that look like nails that you can apply your technology to. And that's what we did next. Next slide. So we approached the Library of Virginia, which is the Virginia State Archives, because they were trying to sort their records to make them public so that when Tim Kaine was, he was the then governor, but he was going to be Hillary Clinton's vice president candidate, they wanted to make his records public so reporters and others could look at them. And they had 400,000 documents that their senior state archivist had looked at and spent 2 years doing, and they wanted to know, could our technology do as well as Roger was the archivist, because if it could do as well as Roger, then we could use the technology instead of Roger. Next slide. So what we did was we took the 400,000 documents and we redid them using the TAR. And I'll explain what this looks like. There were three topics. One was legal hold. There were documents that were related to a Virginia Tech shooting that couldn't be made public. And Roger found 0.01 more than we did. Archival were documents that were to be made public, and restricted were public records, but for some reason they either had a social security number or a phone number, or they were about children and couldn't be made public. So you can see the numbers on recall, in other words, finding the same numbers are pretty much indistinguishable. At precision, in other words, accuracy, we won. At F1, we won. And at effort, we won. So we were able to show in this second context that we were better than a senior state archivist at classifying records. Next slide. Now we decide, maybe we can go into the health area. So there was a another competition in Europe looking to find articles, medical articles, in a huge database of medical articles. And we wanted to see, could we use our technology to do that? Next slide. Whoops, I don't know why that's sideways, so you'll have to turn your head a little. But if you look at the three bottom ones that say UWA, UWG, and UWX, and you look at, there were 759 documents to find, and you can see we won that competition. We were the only ones of all the different technologies that found more than 700 of the documents. That was in 2018. Next slide. So another way, for those of you who are more visual, green would be perfection, finding every single one of the documents, and we were the top three curves. We were the closest to perfection. Next slide. So here's how we get to COVID. We get a call from the knowledge translation team at St. Michael's Hospital. They were doing some work on behalf of the Canadian Frailty Network, Health Canada, and the World Health Organization. And they had been asked to find in a huge database of millions and millions and millions of documents, all of the documents that related to treatment for COVID-19. And normally when they do what's called a systematic review, they do very much what lawyers were doing with these very sophisticated keyword searches, and it takes them a year or more. The problem was they only had 2 weeks to do it. And somebody on the team had been a Waterloo grad and knew about us, and he asked, can you help us? We have 32 million documents that are in a published database of articles. We have med archives and bioarchives, which are preprints, papers people print or put up on the web, but they haven't been peer reviewed yet. We have the US clinicaltrials.gov, which had another 355,000. And then we had a bunch of European, Chinese, and Japanese preprint servers. And we combined all of this. And the thing you have to remember is this is updating every day. It is not a static collection. In the law. You get all of the documents and you only have to do this once. But in systematic reviews, somebody, especially during COVID, new papers were coming out every single day. So they asked us, help us find everything. And why would you want to find everything? Because you might have a study where you get a very, very small treatment effect in one study, but if you have 6 studies with a small treatment effect, then that might be more convincing that that is a useful treatment than if there were only one. So the thought was, can we find all the studies so that they can do a meta study? Next slide. I'd like to show you, hopefully if this works, what this looks like. So I'm going to share my screen, and I want to share, and I want to bring us to the database. And hopefully you can see my screen now. So this is a very simple user interface. We wanted to keep it really, really simple for the researchers, make it look sort of like Google. In this database is all of those documents I mentioned to you, about 35 million or so, but they're constantly updating every day. And what you could do was put a search in here about what you're interested in. So say I wanted to find everything written about hydroxychloroquine and COVID-19. So I put this search term in, and I press the button, and the first article comes up, and the only thing that's highlighted is hydroxychloroquine because that's what I put in. If I wanted to look at the article, I could press on this pub met and I'd actually be taken right to the article. But I see right away this has to do with dermatology. It's not relevant. So I'm going to teach the algorithm. It's not relevant. And it is going to bring up another article. And if you saw it, it was about 1/10 of a second that it took for the new article to come up. What it did in that 1/10 of a second was re-rank 35 million documents from most likely to least likely to be responsive based on what I've taught it already. So we can see it hasn't yet gotten what I'm looking for, so I'm going to mark it non-responsive, non-relevant. Oh, it's dragging a little bit. We had this problem yesterday, but let's give it a minute. Let me try again. Not rel. Hydroxychloroquine in pregnancy, not rel. Hydroxychloroquine past, present, and future. So I'm not sure whether this is relevant. So I'm going to go to the article and I'm going to, it doesn't have an abstract, but I'm going to look down at other articles that are similar, and I don't see anything on COVID-19. So I'm going to go back and say that that's not relevant. Hydroxychloroquine for asthma, not relevant. Psoriasis, not relevant. And eventually, it is going to get me to COVID-19. But it's going to take a little while because there are millions and millions and millions of studies in here. But I'm going to keep teaching it that what's not relevant. And you can see the speed at which somebody can do this. So let's do a new search. Let's say I just do COVID treatment. So the first thing that comes up is vitamin D deficiency and treatment with COVID-19 incidents. Well, it's not quite on point, so I'm going to tell it not relevant. But now it finds hydroxychloroquine use during COVID-19. And you can see it's picked up infection as a possibly relevant term. So I'm going to say I'm interested in this. Management of conjunctivitis, not relevant. Off-label prescribing in the midst of a pandemic, treatment or prophylactic, interested. COVID-19 and anxiety, not interested. And what this would do is very, very, very quickly, we're able to find the relevant documents. Now, this was the corrigendum after they found out that hydroxychloroquine wasn't, in fact, working. And it was very interesting because we were watching on TV and President Trump was saying that all this stuff was working. And we were seeing in the database at the exact same time that the studies had been withdrawn. Now, the other thing this can do is if this document weren't in English, I could right click and say translate to English, and it could do that from Japanese, French, whatever other language, just automatically translate it to English. So that's how that worked. And let me go back to you now, Sarah, and I'll talk a little bit about this. So we were able to do this task using this kind of technology in 2 weeks when it would normally take a year or so. Next slide.
Maura, just a heads up. I have 5 minutes left.
Yes. So we got lots of media attention for this. We ended up getting, next slide, 3 publications in medical journals for this work. And next slide. And a bunch of new collaborations. So once people heard about this, the Lois Dietz Foundation approached us and they said, this is a really rare disease and we want to find every single thing written about this rare disease, but every study doesn't say Lois Dietz in it. Many of the studies just mention the gene. And there are just millions and millions of documents, and we don't know how to do this. So we've been working with them to find all of the documents. We've written a bunch of grants. So next slide. So that's how you get from law to medicine using AI. And if anybody has any questions, I'm more than happy to answer them. But this has been loads of fun. And the challenge is convincing people that this is as good as or better than the benchmark that they're already using. And it's in the law, it was very, very, very hard to do. Even with the empirical research, we had a really hard time convincing lawyers. With the doctors, it was much easier to do because there was no way that they could review 35 million documents in 2 weeks. So they were desperate.
Excellent. Well, thank you. Thank you. I'd like to ask a few questions.
Sure.
So, this is pretty incredible. How does this now affect our future? Is this going to be something that's widespread across every law office, or like what does the future look like in your mind?
It has made a huge impact in the legal profession. I was called the most dangerous lawyer in America because imagine your firm is making $4.50 or $5 a document, and then Grossman comes along and decreases that by 50 times, and that didn't go over well in the legal world. People were very, very angry at me, and it led to a lot of questioning of our work. But in large litigation, this is now used all over the world. So it has had tremendous impact. And I think moving forward, we're now working on tools. Can you imagine if you can use this to search the web and you want to find everything about yourself, and you don't just want to use a keyword search, you want to find everything about yourself in Japanese and Chinese and Russian. Right now, there's no great way to do that, even with Google, but you could with a tool like this.
Okay, so looking forward now, I mean, let's assume there's going to be a rush of people reaching out to you. They're going to contact you by your contact info on the screen. How big is your team? How many inquiries can you handle? Is it just yourself and your partner, or you have a broader group under you?
For most of the work that we do, it's Gordon and I through my law firm, which has been more than enough. But I have a team of grad students working on this work also. So I have one graduate student, for example, looking at highlighting and how much different kinds of highlighting helps you to move even quicker. I have another student looking, for example, at how many errors can you make in the coding before you throw off the algorithm, because people worry, what if I make a few coding errors? So we've got the team doing research, but for most of the professional work, Gordon and I do that, but we haven't had a problem doing fulfilling all the needs that I hope I get to the day where I have more work than I can do.
Okay, well, thanks again for your wonderful talk. We're just up with time now, and I'm going to ask Sarah to get ready for our next presenter, and Maura, you'll just be transitioned to the next one. And again, thanks very much.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me.